Well, have I got an interview for you today? If you're thinking about starting your own business, being a consultant, or more importantly, maybe even jumping back into teaching, well, Brie Anderson's going to talk a little bit about her journey, how she's been what she calls a tech nerd to being a consultant, starting her own company, and now she's back teaching college to probably some kids that are not too much younger than she is, and in some cases, older than her. And she has so much to offer in terms of how to lead and talking about marketing, but she's just an inspiring young woman, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So let's dive into this episode and talk with Brie Anderson. Hi, and welcome to another episode of You're in Charge Now What? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And as always, the goal of this channel is to help those of you that now find yourself in charge of a team, a division, or even a business build the skills necessary to create and lead high-performing teams. Each week, I focus on one topic, be it myself or with my guest, and we're going to give you some tips and strategies that have helped us in our careers so that you can apply them to your business and increase your bottom line revenue with consistent results. So, can't wait to share this time that we're going to have here with Brie Anderson. I've come to know Brie over the last year, and she's just a fascinating individual, someone that I just wanted to bring on because I think she has a lot of value for you guys. So, Brie, thanks so much for joining. And then, I'll let you do the introduction because you got a great intro. But thanks for joining me.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this. This is a lot different than most of the things that I do. So I'm excited to talk about this with you today. Like you said, we kind of met like a year ago in Brian Fanzo's mastermind of sorts. And in that, I am a digital marketing strategist that works with people that are, one person. So like Brian Fanzo, I work with Brian Fanzo,
Right.
and then I consult all the way up to like Fortune 500 companies. So I like to kind of say that I'm an analytical nerd with a soft spot for strategy. I really like the numbers and using numbers to make good results, right?
Right.
That's kind of just, a lot of people just call it data driven marketing, which is cool, but I like that little tagline there. So
That's great. Well, thanks. So yeah, and why I was excited to chat with you, we've connected online. We had a few phone chats, but what I'm trying to do with this channel is bring people on here to talk about a different side. So for you, for marketing, what I want to sort of break down for people who find themselves now in charge. A couple things. So one is, you, as you said, I get hired by someone like Brian, or I go get hired by a
mhm.
Fortune 500 company to handle a project, and we sit down and we talk about it. So that's what I'd like to start off with. When someone brings you in, and all of a sudden you're either before the meeting or you finally get the green light, yes, I'm in charge of this project. What's your process in order to either lay it all out first, and then we can go into how you deliver? But what's that? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. They just go, yep, I'll do it, and then go, now what do I do?
Yeah, right. So I think there are a few things here. I know you talk about this all the time. Communication is key. That communication right up front, because a lot of the times when you're brought on, let's say I'm going and I'm going to go consult with a Fortune 500 company.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, the team that makes the decision that I'm going to be working with the marketing team to do X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
those aren't the people in that room aren't the only people that I'm going to be working with. So you kind of have to make that sell over and over and over again, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of that just comes back to proving value and being trustworthy, I think. Um, so especially, I'm pretty young. I look young.
Right.
Um, and so a lot of times I end up in situations too where I'm managing people that are younger than I am. I mean, older than I am.
Right.
Sorry. I'm managing people that are older than I am. So a lot of it's just coming out and proving that value. Sometimes people want to hear credentials. Sometimes people just want you to ramble and prove that you're a nerd.
Right.
It just kind of depends. But for me, something that's really important is just having that open communication and saying, hey, we're all on the same team here. We're trying to get the same thing done. So how can we work together to achieve those goals? So I just got a new client, and we were talking. I talked to the CEO, and then all of a sudden, we're bringing in a third party who helps with content creation, right?
Right.
And that's great, but sometimes we have conflicting ideas. But as soon as I feel that tension, a lot of times we communicate, especially in our industry, communicate
Mhm.
over email or phone calls or whatever. As soon as I feel that tension, I say, let's halt on this conversation and let's jump on a Zoom call,
Right.
because all of these nonverbal cues and seeing the other person, I feel like that makes the conversation a lot easier to navigate and more valuable for everyone in the conversation.
Great. So when you're so let's take a mini step back. So when you're sitting there in that first time, and I think the point is really valid, and I don't want it to get breezed over, is the fact that sometimes the people who are interviewing you and making the decision to hire you into a project or to lead something are not the people necessarily you're working with day to day, and those other
Right.
decisions. Um, so it is really important to understand, maybe even ask those questions in that initial conversation. So a good tip, if you're taking on a project, is asking that question of saying, who else is involved, and what's the
Right.
structure, and what authority do I have? Because to your point is, when you bring in third parties or other people, who makes the final decision, and how are things settled? And we can still have those Zoom calls, but when we're working side by side with people, ultimately someone has to say, this is the way we go. And is it you?
Exactly.
Is it them? Are we having a mediation? So I think that's really important. But what I love about what you just said is it email can be really uh, a way to misunderstand, just like texting can, and just like social
Yep.
media can. But when you're really on a Zoom call looking at someone and understanding their perspective, and you give them time to color what they're saying, I think that's a huge, great tip for people who are in charge. Get in front of people. If you're not physically there, jump on the technology to do that. I think that's really solid. So what else? Let's say you're mapped out and you have that initial thing. How do you set, and this is something that comes up a lot, people ask me this one is, well, how do I plan it out, or how do I set goals? Do you work from the end backwards? Do you move forward, combination of each? How do you take, like you said, I just got hired, here's my project, there obviously must be a timeline for deliverables.
Right.
How does that work out in your world for you?
So I'm kind of a big picture person. That's why I like strategy and in analytics. I like to look at the big picture and then go, okay, what are the steps within this big picture?
Mhm.
Usually, and I've actually just kind of started doing this. I like to do kind of like trial periods or even like smaller projects first, because what's really important to me is that relationship. So if there's going
Right.
to be a bunch of tension or we're just not going to be the right fit, that's
Mhm.
fine. I think a lot of people kind of have an issue with that, but mm, you're not going to be able to work with everyone. I mean,
Right.
that's kind of the reality of it.
Right.
But when it comes to setting the timelines, like I said, I generally I like to look at the big picture first and then go, okay, maybe this is a one-off project or maybe this will turn into a retainer. But what are the steps? Um, which can be hard. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that because that does take a lot of time that you're not necessarily getting paid for.
Right.
Um, so it's kind of one of those like there's still big picture. Like you don't want to do too much research and spend 15 hours on a proposal trying to look into everything the company's already doing and
Mhm.
all that stuff.
But would you say, so let's take it, besides that, you've already been hired and they give you a project and they
Oh,
say,
okay,
okay,
yeah.
I need to deliver this, or we need this in 3 months or 2 months
Yes.
or 1 month. What's your process to break that down? Now, I get what you were saying. When you're making a proposal, you can spend a lot of time trying to answer a lot of questions that you may not, you know,
Right.
they may not have thought of. I'd like to focus twist it a little bit to someone who's in charge of a team now, or they're internally in their company,
Okay.
and someone says, "Congratulations, now you're in charge of this project X." How should they chunk it or plan it in order to not get too far behind, or think they have all the
Right.
time in the world?
So in that instance, I really like to get everyone together first because
Mhm.
especially in the positions that I've been in. So I work in digital marketing, but there's so many different things that touch digital marketing,
Right.
right? You have your content team, you have your social team, you have SEOs, IT, web developers, all these different people that are taking it in. I really want to get as many of those people in the same place at once, because, and the reason for that is everybody's going to have a different, like a not that that's not necessarily the way I want to say that, like approval process, right?
Right.
So however many people need to check this off. So what you don't want to do is come in, they've hired you, and you say, okay, this is the timeline without talking to anyone because
Right.
it may be unrealistic. So you might say, all right, the copy's going to be approved in a week. Well, it might take them 3 days, and then it also has to be checked off by A, B, and C team,
Right.
legal, PR, and the CEO or whatever. So it's just not feasible. So I like to have those conversations first. And once we have those conversations, then you know what to take into account. I really like Gantt charts so we can
Right.
see what things can be happening at the same time,
Hmm.
but still moving us forward.
Right.
Um, so it's really important to know what teams you're working with, what their bandwidth looks like, and what the processes look like, because you don't want to come in there and try and disrupt everything that they've been doing and, and essentially set everybody up for failure.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And I think, again, that's something is a real tactical thing. We joke with little tools in your toolbox, but I think it is easy for newer managers to feel that, well, I'm going to go prove, like to your point, you hired me, I'm going to
Yeah.
prove to you that I'm the right person. And then next thing you know, I'm just changing things for changing things. And I'm just putting all these demands out into the world, and everyone's looking, going, you haven't even asked me my opinion, you just rolled in here.
Yeah.
And I think the one that gets missed a lot, which I thought was really a good point, which was the bandwidth. A lot of times people don't realize how much, what that, now for those of you, again, bandwidth means how much, what's your workload. If I can handle 10 and I'm at 9, giving me 2 or 3 more things to do, maybe over my bandwidth. So it
Hmm.
is understanding that. And then I like that, because you are the strategist, but now you also can direct people, see what's going on at the same time. Also then layer in to say, well, if when Brie gets done with this, then I can hand it off to Glenn, and then he's off and running. Okay, we move that, or these two can move in tandem. I really like that concept of planning, because I think people who struggle come in with, as you said, the blinders are on, and I'm
Yeah.
going. And I think it's interesting, because when we were going back and forth before, we talked a lot about, you played sports, you
Hmm.
played soccer, and you were rugby, I believe it was too, in
Yeah.
college, right? So that's the concept of team as well, as everyone has a role to play, but you have to, someone who's on the sidelines guiding everything, or even if you're the team captain and you're, the sort of the field general, you have to understand everybody's strengths and weaknesses. You have to understand their positioning. You have to understand a lot of different things that are going on. Very similar. So how do you think that, because you said you were the president of the rugby, how did sports actually help you translate in terms of what you just said? I have a room full of people with different agendas. How do I get them all? How did sports help you in managing teams?
Yeah, so I was a goalkeeper for 14 years and I actually played collegiate soccer my first year of college. Um, so as the goalkeeper, you're the only one on your team that can see the entire field,
Right.
right? And when you're in that position, it's up to you to be able to tell everybody else, like, hey, this is what you're missing. There's a gap right here. You need to be in this gap.
Right.
And you have to be able to do that while the game is going on, right? So they could be in the 18.
I lost you here for a minute. Did I lose you?
Oh,
There you go. You're back.
you can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right. We can edit away later. Don't worry.
Okay. Um, so as the game's progressing and people are closing in, you still have to be able to pay attention to the game and notice the gaps.
Right.
And I think that's really helped me in this strategic, analytical, and in managing teams too. Like, um, it, because you have to keep everything moving forward and be able to notice when somebody's falling behind, or be able to notice when there's a breakdown in the flow, right? 14 years of managing 10 other people on a field, while all this chaos is ensuing, definitely taught me a lot of those lessons.
So let's build on that, because what I find fascinating, I always talk in terms of managing teams and
Hmm.
as a sports analogy, just because it is this, I always think that the most successful leaders have that coach's mentality, like you said. They're,
Yes,
they're, they're
absolutely.
coaching and they're watching, which ties then into patience and, communicating. Um,
Hmm.
so for you, it, what I wanted to, so let's talk about the two different ones. Like, what do you see as the difference? So if I'm coming in and I have that coach's mentality, I'm taking over a team even for a short period of
Hmm.
time. Are there differences that you see when you're dealing with a smaller company versus a Fortune 500 company? You mentioned that. Do you see um, barriers to that? Do more red
Absolutely.
tape? What's your take on that?
So they obviously both have pros and cons. So when you work with a smaller company, they're a lot more agile.
Mhm.
You are able to be a lot more hands-on. You get more say in things. So like when I work with Brian, I can go and do whatever I want. He trusts me, and I only have that one barrier to entry with an idea.
Right.
Now, if I'm working with a bigger company, we're talking about multiple levels of approval, longer timelines. So if I say we need to run this campaign, it might be 2 months before it's even approved. And
Right.
then we can start working on, getting the creative and all that fun stuff. Now, on the flip side, the bigger companies have a lot more money to work with,
Yes.
which means they're going to be a lot more lenient about, well, generally speaking, a lot more lenient about where the money is going, how the money is being used. They're still running a, a like a good ship, but
Right.
if you're looking at a smaller company, they're going to be looking at the dollars, and generally they hold them closer to their chest. So you have to do a lot more of the proving value, a lot more of, um, kind of holding their hand and saying it's going to be okay. We're going to spend this money, but we're going to make it back,
Right.
right? And they really want to know how every dollar is being spent. As opposed to, and this is just my experience, some of those larger companies, they just go, we need this, we need a return on this, or we have this budget, we need to
Right.
spend it. How are we going to spend it?
Right.
Right. So, they both have their pros and cons. One of them, you have a lot more freedom, but it's like dollars are closer to their chest. The other one,
Yes.
you have a lot less freedom, but a lot more money.
Yeah, we find that as well with our agency, working with certain levels of companies. Everybody wants a return, but you're right,
Yeah.
smaller companies, every dollar has a bigger impact because it means more to them. And also, as you said, the bigger companies, take longer to make decisions, and that's one of the things that I had to learn was patience with their process, because
Yep.
I was going, why can't we just make this decision? Oh, we have to have another meeting to have a meeting to have another meeting about the meeting,
Yes.
and you're going,
Yes.
good lord, why are we having all these meetings? So let me pivot now to one of the things that I just have just a lot of admiration for. I did it for a little bit as well, and that's teaching. So talk a
Yes.
little bit about how you ended up teaching. Here you are, you have your own business and you're working, and again, you're very visible online and you do a lot of writing for a lot of the publications, in the digital space. How did you end up being either approached or agreed to teaching college, and what tell me a little bit about that.
Well, just like you said too, like it's that coach's mentality, right? Like I love people and I love seeing them succeed. That I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like if you're going to be a good leader, that's you have to actually care about the people. You
Right.
can't just care about the end result or care about the numbers. You have to care about the people and like
Correct.
genuinely care about them.
Yes.
Um, and so I was working at an agency and they started because so I actually teach at a tech school. And so they knew they wanted to do a digital marketing program. It started out as a social media marketing, but we turned it into digital marketing.
Right.
Um, and what they do at tech schools is they have a board of industry experts that come in and they give them all the ideas. Sometimes they write the curriculum, what
Hmm.
have you. So
Yep.
I was a part of that board. And we got everything was approved, and then they went, okay, well now we need people to teach. Um, and so at this point, I really wanted to go off and start my own business, but I was working at an agency. And so teaching was a really good way for me to have a full time income with benefits while
Right.
also starting my business. Um, and I really enjoy, like I said, watching people grow and helping people grow. And I always knew I wanted to teach. I actually have a degree in social media marketing, technically.
Hmm.
Um, but after my first internship, my sophomore year, I came back and knew more about digital marketing than most of the people teaching me. Um, because it was a university and most of them were teaching from research. They all had to have PhDs.
Right.
And if you think about having a PhD and being in 2012 or 2013, 2014, those years, those two things with industry experience, they just wouldn't, they don't
Right.
match, right?
Right.
So they had been removed from the industry for a while and were teaching, based on research. So I always knew I wanted to come in and teach and kind of disrupt the way that higher education was teaching digital marketing.
Right.
And so it was kind of just very serendipitous. It was an easy step to take. And so, yeah, now I teach and now I have students again in a situation because it is a tech school. Most of my students are older than I am. I'm getting a lot of students that have already been to university, gotten a degree in marketing, and can't get jobs because they have no technical skills.
Right.
Um, and so that's our classes are hands on. They have to take 2 lecture classes, and the rest of them are labs where we're actually going in and doing things. Um, and again, that's kind of fun for me to see them grow, see them going into Google Analytics and going, oh my God, what is this?
Right.
To being able to ask a question and then be able to get, an answer and analyze the answer and give back a good recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's very similar. And why I connected with you on that is that sort of it happened to me as well. My brother and I, who run our agency, we've written a lot of books for um, digital marketing, especially a lot
Hmm.
of our clients are automotive. And so we wrote a book, or he wrote a book, and it was literally a textbook. So we were reached out to people saying, oh, we have some online classes and you should take them. And someone said, you know what, you should go talk to this gentleman. They need your help. And it was up at Northwood University. They're one of the only universities that have an automotive marketing and management course. So I was talking to this gentleman and he said, we've been thinking about a digital marketing course. but we just haven't been able to do it. And I said, how are you graduating people in marketing today without digital marketing? And they said the same
Yeah.
thing. Well, we'd bring in a few people, experts, but there was no course. And I said, well, I have the content. You can have the content here, license the content.
Yeah.
And he said, well, would you teach it? And of course I'm going, I live in New Jersey, you're in Michigan. How are we going to do this? But I said, yes. And so I would fly up one day a week and then teach it remotely. But same thing, it was a very hands-on course.
Hmm.
One day I would tell them, okay, this is SEO in its basic form. And then they broke off into groups and they all had websites, and then they had to analyze them, and they had to stand up in front of me and say, here's what we saw. So the goal was, their final project was, I gave them a website, a different one. And I said, okay, analyze this. Now you're standing in front of me either as you're going to be the marketing person who's selling the owner on why you should do this, or you're the marketing manager they hired to do this. And they had to go through and do SEO. They had to look at paid search. They had to look at content. They had to look at social media and say, here's what's working, here's what's not, and here's our recommendation. So I think what you're doing right there with the tactical skills is so key, because it is really one of the interesting industries where, theory is one thing, but if you
Right.
can't find it and do it and explain it in terms that people understand, it's just
Yes.
not, it gets a little, so those students of yours are going to be off on such a great foot. But let me ask you about this, because I think this is where I want to bridge this whole student thing, is because I think this is one of the struggles for newer managers, is that they
Hmm.
treat everybody the same way, meaning they teach everybody the same way. Now you have a room
Right.
of however many students, or you go into these companies and you have 10 or 15 people on a team, or 5 people or more. Give me, for the people who are listening, new managers, new people in charge, how do you adapt, or how do you recognize how someone should be coached or trained? Is it innate to you because you've been doing it for so long, or are there certain skills or things that you could share, like a tip for someone to say, this person learns this way, so don't do this?
Yeah. So that's actually funny you say that. So I start every class, I hand out note cards. I mean, I don't know. I had a professor do this at one point, and I thought it was really smart. So I just kind of adapted it. I hand out note cards. I say, especially because it is a tech school, we do serve a more underprivileged population.
Sure.
So those are things you also have to take into account. That's the thing. So we always go to like what's their learning style, and those kinds of things. But you also have to take into consideration their lives outside of work too,
Right.
um, because they are people, they are humans.
Hmm.
Um, so anyways, I on the first day of class, I hand out a note card. I say, what's your name, why are you a part of this, because that's a big deal too. Are you just taking this course because it's required? Because that person's going to be a lot harder to teach than somebody that's
Right.
taking it because they're
Right.
passionate about
Yes.
it. So I ask that question. I ask, what kind of learner are you? So like, if you could have it any way, how would you learn? Some people don't want to be talked to, they just want the material, and they want to do it themselves.
Right.
Some people really need that hands-on, somebody over their shoulder telling them, okay, now click this, now do this. You know what I mean? There are a bunch of different ways you could learn. And I also ask, is there anything as it pertains to learning that I need to know about you? And some people
Ooh, I
will
like that.
say things like, um, or as it pertains to this class, I need to know about you. Some people are rushing from their day job to try and get in, and they might be a few minutes late. Um, so I really like to get to know my students as soon as possible,
Right.
um, so that I can be watching for things, and notice when something goes a little haywire. Like if I have a student that's showing up every single day, getting all of their work done, and 3/4 of the way through the semester, they've missed 2 classes and they haven't turned in a couple assignments, something's wrong,
Right.
right? So, you know, you, I'm a very observant person, and I think that goes really, really well. It helps me be a better leader,
Right.
because I can tell, when something's going wrong. Same thing in sports, and how do they need to be coached. I knew that there were girls on my team that I could scream at and say, you need to be on the back post. Why aren't you on the back post? And they would respond to that. And
Right.
there were other girls that if I did that, they would cry and walk off the field.
Right. Exactly.
And you
Yes.
have to know which one's which,
Right.
because once you like lose that trust, or you lose, it's one of those things where it's like it takes years to build it up, but it takes seconds to tear it
Sure.
all down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. I love that because, and I love that idea of that card, asking, I always, uh, in one of the videos that I posted on what happens in your first 30 days, that was what I would
Mhm.
say to them is sit down and talk to them, get to know them, what's going
Yes.
on. And then also, how do you learn? And I think that's really perceptive. And I think that's a good thing for people to realize and reinforce because I can say it, but you're going, here's what we do. Because
Right.
if I am a person that just give it to me, give me the textbook. I had a professor at school, very first, he was a marketing professor, actually. The very first day he said, if you can read the textbook and come in and do the midterm and the final, he goes, I don't care if you show up. He
Yep.
goes, I'm a good teacher. It's going to be a fun class. But if that's the way you learn, that's okay. And so again, if somebody needs visuals, someone needs that, it's going to take me a
Yep.
couple times. Listen, it takes me a couple times to get it, but once I get it, I'm good. So just be patient with me versus someone else who's just give me the book, I'll read it myself, I'll do it. Two different ways of adapting. So then
Yeah.
how has that either which came for, I mean, it seems like it's all just always blended with you, meaning it isn't that it's
Right.
almost you brought the sports, that concept of leadership from
Mhm.
there, and coaching into your business. So when I go into a company, maybe you're not handing out cards and saying, how do you
Right.
learn?
Right.
But you're watching for that to say, oh,
Exactly.
you're that type, you're guarded, you're here, you're this. So
Mhm.
it's sussing out your team so that, and even for you, as you said earlier, it's even just getting everybody together and going, what's your bandwidth? What's your time
Mhm.
frame? That's the equivalent in my mind of saying, well, how do you learn, right? To know your team, because then you can pull the levers, right? You can know who
Yep.
to push, who to pull. You know what to watch for, and then same thing. How it ties into a school year or a semester
Mhm.
where you go, this is where we got to get to, and then we sort of reverse engineer back, and we have
Yeah.
different time frames and things like that. So for you, with this teaching and adapting, what do you think has been the biggest thing? What's the biggest thing you've learned from your students that
Yes.
you are surprised that you didn't think was like it's one of those like, oh, I didn't see this one coming? What would you say?
So this is really funny because with everything I've said, this should have been like a no-brainer. I was very, very surprised the difference between my first semester of students and my second semester of students. So obviously the first semester they moved on, they're in new classes. I'm teaching the same exact class to all new people, and
Right.
the class was completely different. Um, and to me, that was like mind boggling because I'm like, this is the exact same material, but the people weren't the same. It's just like when you go into a new team, right?
Right.
I mean, because that's what it is. We have a new team of people that we have to get from point A to point B. Um, and it was a big adjustment for me because I don't know. I just didn't even see it coming. But their needs were different, their life experiences were different, they were just different people.
And it's
And
also
so
timing, probably, going into
oh yeah.
school in the fall after you've been clear headed with the summer and you're excited
Hmm.
versus I've been sitting in classes for 3 months and I'm starting to get a little burnt out about being in school and that
Right.
drudgery. And now all of a sudden you're, hey, here we go. We're going to start something new. And oh, who's this teacher? And
Yeah.
that's the other thing I think that's interesting that we didn't really touch on is that I think when you're coming in as much as you're checking out this, your team and students, and they're watching you
Oh,
and
absolutely.
they're starting to go, okay, well, who are you? And,
Hmm.
heart, why are you here? How good could you possibly be? But it's also probably looking at you and going, well, what type of manager are you going to be? What type of person are you going to be?
Yeah.
What type of teacher are you going to be? What type of manager are you going to be? Because we've all had those managers or teachers that either were great or were
Mhm.
not so great. And that, I think that's the dance in the beginning of who are you going to be?
Absolutely. It reminds me of that. This is really lame, but it reminds me of that episode of How I Met Your Mother where Ted teaches for the first time and he doesn't know what he's going to be, like what kind of teacher he's going to be. And he goes in there and it's like every other sentence he changes. He's like really stern. And then he's like, oh, you can call me Ted. And then, he like goes back and forth. But you kind of have to, in my mind, I'm a very like go with the flow. Like I feel people out and kind of go back and forth, like mimic what they're doing
Right.
and then you it's a fine dance. But I try and go in and like I said, I prove my value and then I just say like that we're all here for the same thing. Like
Right.
you guys want to learn X, Y, and Z. These are the things you're going to learn. And if you are the person that can sit in the back with your headphones in, do the assignments and retain all the information, good on you. If you're the person that's going to stay 15 minutes after class and ask me questions to clarify everything that I said in that
Right.
class, I'm more than happy to do that with you. That's fine.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, but for me, it's very much getting a feel for the room and then mimicking that and shifting who I need to be for those people. Some people have never had that, and this is another thing too when it comes to like life stuff. Like some people have never had structure, and you're going to be the first person that ever gives them structure that they have to follow. You
Right.
see this a lot of times with those smaller companies. Like you're coming in and they've been doing a little bit of everything and they have their own way and you're coming in to maybe optimize kind of their flow and you're going to be the first person to give them structure and you have to be ready for that pushback. You have to be ready for the excuses. You have to be ready for, even their valid concerns and you have to be able to answer to those, if that
Right.
makes sense.
And no, that's a great point because just like a classroom or just like sports, once the game starts, you can do all the planning you want, but things happen. Same
Oh,
things
yeah.
in a class, things happen. When you're going in and you're dealing with a team of people and you don't know the history, you know a little bit, but now
Mhm.
you're trying to suss it out. It is going to be pushback or concern or, well, this is the way I was told. A lot of times the first pushback is just a defensive, like, well, this is the way I was told, so don't fire me, don't get me in
Right,
trouble.
right.
And you have to be able to, and I think that's where that coaching mentality is. Listen, I understand, but we're going here, and here's what we need you to
Mhm.
do. Here's your new, some new role. I'll help you. And I think for you, out of this, as we're sort of summarizing a lot of what we were talking about today, I think one of the things that's key that I'm hearing, it is that constant teaching of we're learning, there's
Mhm.
accountability, we got to be able to do this. Here's where we're going. I'm going to help you. I think a lot of newer managers, sometimes I've seen it, especially those that were good at what they did and now they're in charge of the team. They were really good at something, but they couldn't explain why they were good at it or how they did it. It was just like, I think it's like a natural athlete. If you really are
Yeah.
naturally athletic, or a really great athlete, a lot of times they're not very good coaches because they look at
Mhm.
people and go, well, just do what I did. I don't understand why you're doing that. And so I think that reminding yourself as a leader, as a team, it not everybody is as quick as you, not everybody is gets the concepts in your head, and you have to do your due diligence of how do you learn, what am I going to guide you, I might have to teach you 3 or 4 times to get this through to you, to be able to move the whole team forward. Does that make sense from what
Yeah.
you've seen?
Absolutely, and I think that observation and being humble, those are the 2 things basically where it comes down to. You need to be able to observe whether or not they're getting it. You watch their face. Are they I mean, teachers are great at this. When you're looking into a classroom and you can go, "Okay, all of you are looking at me like I have 17 eyeballs. Something did not get across correctly."
Right.
And being able to take that step back and go, "Okay, so, one, did I go into nerd mode? Did I start talking too fast? Was I looking at the board? Could they not hear me?" You have to be able to check yourself too. You can't
Yes.
just check the team around you. especially if all of them are looking at you like you're crazy, that there's a common denominator and it's probably you.
Right.
so so
Right.
you need to be able to observe others, but also have that self-awareness to be able to observe yourself, and be able to figure out where it was that you lost people, or maybe you kind of strayed from the path, right?
I think that's a great point. And as we sort of summarize here, I think, and wind up a bit here, I think a lot of what you said just makes so much sense. And why I wanted to bring you on, because I find all of the things that I know about you just online, all these little pieces, they tie together. And like I said, we could go sit here, we could go nerd out on marketing, but
Oh yeah.
I think the real value that you have is this concept of I didn't know it was that long, but you were a high level athlete. And then
Hmm.
you are doing, consulting, and you are doing project based work, and you're continuing to do it, which means you deliver. So there has to be some sort of structure in your brain that works. And then to pivot over to teaching and to be able to deliver that. I think that's a lot of what new managers or people who are in charge of things need to
Absolutely.
understand, is because we have a tendency to just default when we make mistakes, or when we're
Hmm.
young or new at this. I shouldn't say young age wise, I mean just young as a manager. I mean, you could be 40 and it's the first time you're in charge of something. It's that I got to prove to you, I got to prove my value to you. And I think we sometimes rush or push, or we don't take the
Hmm.
time, or we think we should don't I don't need to do that. I don't need to figure out, well, how Brie she's on my team, she just has to listen to me. And that's a danger. And I think everything that you've talked about, and I hope people go back and watch this a few times, because there's just so much in there, from the cards, from the questions, from checking yourself, which I don't think a lot of my default is always, if the first time, shame on me. I always say that if you fail
Hmm.
and I'm your coach, first time, shame on me, I wasn't clear. Second and third time, okay, we got to figure something out here.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, right.
but first time, shame on me. And I think that's a really healthy way to embrace, because I think that keeps you part of the team
Yeah,
versus I'm
absolutely.
above the team. You just have a different role on the team. You just have different duties. And so I really, really love that. So I end up everything here. We'll let you tell everybody also where they can find you around. And you should definitely follow Brie. Everybody should follow Brie. She has great, great content. Um, so as somebody, so again, I always ask this question of everybody who joins me here, is what's the one thing that either someone you learned, I know you said your father was in the military, something you learned, or just from your experiences, somebody who's sitting there right now and they said, I want to get into leading a team, or I want to be into management, whatever that means. What's the one thing you would say, here's my best advice for you as you head into this new role? What would you say?
Care about the success of your people, not the success of yourself.
I love that one.
Because because ultimately being a leader is taking other people, and I guess that's kind of the idea of servant leadership, depending, there are all these different philosophies, but for me, all of my success has come from, I truly just cared about the people on my team and getting them from point A to point B. Whether I was on a soccer field, because like you said, you're still a part of the team, right? We're all
Right.
going towards the same goal. I might be the captain of the team, but I'm still playing on the field.
Right.
And that's the same thing. Like, you might be leading a team, but it's still a team. You're still on the team. And you shouldn't be worried about, like, okay, am I going to get the next promotion? Am I going to, because those people ultimately fail. You have
Yeah.
to be thinking, okay, so Elizabeth is doing great, Lucy's doing great, John and Jack, but Michael, we need to get Michael up to speed, so that we can all come up together, or
Right.
those kinds of things. I really truly believe that if you care about the success of your people over the success of yourself, that ultimately that's going to bring you success.
I think that's a great I could not agree more. I think that's the way that I've seen the most successful leaders are the ones who care
Hmm.
about their team. They move everybody forward. I think that's a very, very military as well. No one gets left
Yeah.
behind, and we are going to move everyone forward. I think that's a great point. So Brie, thank you so much. This is a lot of fun. We could sit here and chat all day about this, but that's what like I said, my goal was also to bring out different sides of some of my guests that maybe people don't know, all the other things that you can deliver and talk about and chat about as well. So I thank you for that. So tell everybody where they can find you, where you hang out mostly in social, and where they should connect with you if they'd like.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Like I said, I really appreciate it. This was fun. It's something a little bit new for me. I mostly hang out on Twitter, but you can find me just about anywhere. Brie E Anderson. If you Google it, all of my socials will come up. That's that search engine optimization in me. But yeah, Twitter's my playground. I love it over there.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you all for watching. As if you found value, as I always say, please subscribe, click the notification button, throw your comments down in the bottom if you have some new topics you'd like to chat about. I'll be more than happy to either talk about them or find some of my guests that can help me as well. So again, I appreciate your time. Please share it out. I'm sure there's a lot of people who could learn a lot from what Brie had to share today. And as we close out every episode, you're in charge. But now you have a new tool from Brie to make you a little more successful. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Brie.
Thanks.